wanted to share with you today the new cover story article on the GameInformer website and magazine about Dragon Age the Veilguard coming up, and some of the demos that they played and insights they got to see in the game that we haven't seen yet so far in the trailers or in other coverage. And so I'm going over this article. It's by Wesley LeBlanc, and if you would like to subscribe to GameInformer, I'll have a link in the description so you can actually see the website. You can subscribe, read this article and many others, get a physical or a digital copy of the magazine. We're going over some of the stuff he talks about in this article, the interviews he did with BioWare employees, and I'll have one interesting lore bit to share, and otherwise I will avoid spoilers for the story. Now, he plays through the same sequence you get to see in the gameplay reveal trailer, and a little bit further than that. And I'll pick out a few interesting things I wanted to highlight from that, but I will not be discussing any spoilers as how the story goes necessarily beyond that, or how that level plays out exactly. And one of the first things they talk about is why change the name, because it used to be Dragon Age Dreadwolf, and then they decided to change it to Dragon Age the Veilguard. And as Solus in the story wants to bring down the veil which separates the magical world of spirits and the mortal world, it'll bring chaos upon the world, and so the people who want to stop him will eventually become the Veilguard. And the creative director, John Epler, said, Solus is still a central figure in the game. He's still a significant character, but really the focus shifts to the team. We realized Dreadwolf suggests a title focused on a specific individual, whereas the Veilguard, much like Inquisition, focused more on the team. And then LeBlanc talks about the character creator, which is more extensive than any character creator so far in Dragon Age. And they say you get to play as elves, Kunari, humans, and dwarves. These are the same races that you had in Inquisition, but it is good to see it confirmed that you can still play at the same as those same races. You can select pronouns separately from gender and adjust physical characteristics like height, shoulder width, chest size, glute and bulge size, hip width, how bloodshot your eyes are, which I think is funny, how crooked your nose is, and so much more. There must be hundreds of sliders to customize these body proportions and features like skin hue, tone, melanin, and just about anything else you might adjust on a character. Oh, and there's nudity in Veilguard too, which I learned firsthand while customizing my rook. So it'll be the most detailed character creator for Dragon Age, at least so far. And that's great. We'll see how that turns out and what kind of characters we all can create. And if they have good-looking eyebrows this time around or not. Now you can of course play a warrior, mage, or rogue. All three have specializations, which are interesting. There are new specializations that are unique and different from what we've had in Dragon Age before. So you might miss some of the old specializations that are not returning, but hopefully you'll find a new one that you'll like. Now you do get to pick one of 6 backgrounds when you start your character. Does changes a little bit dialogue options and a little bit of the backstory of your character. It makes it so that your interactions with characters from those same factions react to you a little bit differently. BioWare core lead and Mass Effect executive producer Mike Gamble says about the Veilguard that your character Rook ascends because of competency, not because of a magical MacGuffin. So that the difference here is that in Inquisition you become the Inquisitor because you have the mark on your hand and you're the only one who can use that power to close rifts. And Rook is simply there because Rook stepped up to do the job and is good at what they do. They also reiterate that they tried to make a multiplayer version of the game before, but eventually everything was scrapped, and this game will be single player, 0 multiplayer, no microtransactions. Also, while creating your character, you get to pick a name, you get to pick a voice. There's 4 voices, so I assume that means 4 voice actors. and you get to change the pitch of those voices a little bit, so you have even more, as long as that sounds good, you'll have a little bit even more leeway in customizing your character than that you had in Inquisition. And they mentioned that the game starts off in Tevinter, in Minrathous, the capital city of Tevinter, and that they truly had to make it a detailed and magical place. And the directors on Dragon Age say that the team is finally at a point where they're a lot more comfortable working with Frostbite engine, the same engine that they used for Inquisition, but that was the first game they made with that. And I think we can see the results. The worlds are bigger, more detailed, and hopefully the game will play better and smoother as well. And they say, Minrathous is huge, painted in magical insignia that look like cyberpunk-inspired neon city signs and brimming with detail. That's something I mentioned as well in my last video about the Veilguard, is that it looked like it was full of neon signs. They said the team let its imagination run wild. The result is the most stunning and unique city in the series. There are NPCs walking around, which they say are all created with the character creator. Only specific characters like your recruitable companions are made unique and distinct. After the opening mission, you end up in a place called the Lighthouse, and Solus brings you or leads you to that place. And they mention the Lighthouse, much like Skyhold and Inquisition, the Lighthouse is where your team bonds, grows, and prepares for its adventures throughout the campaign. Becomes more functional and homier as you do. So they've already said it doesn't quite go through the extent of Inquisition, but you do upgrade it over time. It does change over time the way this place looks. And LeBlanc here writes, that's something I'm noticing with Veilguard too. There's a heavy emphasis on storytelling and dialogue, and it feels deep and meaty, like a good fantasy novel. BioWare doesn't shy away from minutes-long cutscenes. That's intentional too. For Rook, this story is about what it means to be a leader. You're defining their leadership style with your choices. From the sound of it, my team will react to my chosen leadership style in how my relationships play out. That's demonstrated within the game's dialogue and the special relationship meter on each companion's character screen. And let's talk a bit about the combat. We've already seen in the gameplay reveal trailer, if you have seen it, that they changed to a much more real-time, action-oriented combat. And they definitely went a direction that they wanted to go to. They wanted to make it faster. They wanted to make it more fun. And I'll mention that in a moment. But I'll read this blurb. Pressing start. The start or pause screen is as important to a good RPG as the game outside the menus. Veilguard contains your map, journal, character sheets, skill tree, and a library for lore information. I think those are all things we were expecting anyway, just like in the previous games. You can cross-compare equipment, equip new gear for Rook and your companions, build loadouts for quick change-ups mid-combat, customize you and your party's abilities, and builds via an easy-to-understand skill tree. You won't find minutiae here, just real numbers. That means a new unlocked trait might increase damage by 25% against armor, but that's as in-depth as the numbers get. I don't know what to imagine anything else, but I mean, at least it's not one of those games where you have very detailed, very low percentage incremental upgrades. Because I think we all know certain games that do that, and where at some point we're like, I don't know if this is better. I don't know if this is going to do anything for me. And this game tries to stray away from that to make you understand what upgrades will do. Passive abilities unlock jump attacks, guarantee critical hit opportunities. Some abilities add moves, like a wall of fire to your arsenal if you're a mage. As you spec out the skill tree, which is 100% bespoke to each class, you'll work closer to unlocking a specialization, of which there are 3 for each class, complete with a unique ultimate ability. And they've shared screenshots on the GameInformer website of the skill tree. And so this is, for example, a warrior skill tree, and you build by slowly buying these perks in different directions and unlock new skills until you actually hit this specialization. I don't know if we'll have to unlock these before we actually get to them, but otherwise it looks pretty straightforward that you just work your way towards them, and then you get to actually get the abilities that belong to that specialization. And as you can see for warrior here, they're champion, reaper, and slayer. Only champion is one that at least has the same name as one we've had before. Here's a screenshot of a mage skill tree and closer up some different abilities. And then the different specializations that you have for a mage. Deathcaller, which sounds like Necromancer. Evoker and Spellblade. These are all quite different from what we've had in the past, at least in name. And here for a rogue, a Veil Ranger, which I assume Balara is like, a Saboteur and a Duelist. And as you can see by the pictures, a Duelist looks like they're more to do with using dual blades, and Veil Ranger more with ranged, maybe ranged and magic to some extent. Saboteur also is holding a bow, but maybe you use both. It did look from the gameplay reveal that you can use bows and daggers at the same time, and it's quite fun to see. Following the trend of prior Dragon Age games, Veilguard completed the series shift from tactical strategy to real-time action, but fret not. The tactical pause and play mechanic returns. Though I got a taste of combat in the prologue, Veilguard's drastic departure from all that came before is even more apparent here. And according to the game director, Corinne Bush, they said players complete every swing in real time with special care taken to animation, swing through, and cancelling. You can dash, parry, charge moves, different healing system where you can use potions, and there's even healing magic is coming back finally. You can even start a combo attack, jump out of danger, rush back into the enemy, and then continue your combo attack. You know, use your abilities by just pressing your buttons, or like what we've seen in the Mass Effect style, pause the game, look at an enemy and queue up different abilities or assign different abilities to do on specific enemies while giving you that moment of pause to think about your actions. And you'll have different kinds of attacks and animations depending on your class. So they said here, a sword and shield warrior like we used in the prologue can hip fire or aim their shield to throw it like Captain America, whereas our human mage uses that same button to throw out magical ranged attacks. So parrying, the rogue gets a larger parry window. The mage doesn't get a parry at all, but instead a magical shield that you can hold up as long as you have mana to sustain it. And Dragon Age executive producer Mark Dara, who left BioWare in 2021 but joined the Veilguard team last year as a consultant, says, uncharitably, previous Dragon Age games got to the realm of combat wasn't too bad. In this game, the combat's actually fun, but it does keep that threat that's always been there. You have the focus on Rook on your character, but still have that control and character coming into the combat experience from the other people in the party. He says, this is really the best Dragon Age game I've ever played, noting his bias. This is the one where we get back to our roots of character-driven storytelling, have really fun combat, and aren't making compromises. And when you think about it, yeah, there's definitely improvements you could make in Dragon Age Origins or 2 or even Inquisition's combat systems, where you're gonna have to make a choice whether either you're gonna go either fully turn-based and make it very strategic, or are you going to go real-time and very fast and dynamic, make it feel fun, allow people to use their abilities or strategize a little bit where they can, and they picked the latter. And then a bit about companions. They say companion customization. You can advance your bonds by helping companions on their own personal quests and by including them in your party for main quests. Every relationship level you rank up, shown on their character sheet, nets you a skill point to spend on them. Bush says the choices you make, what you say to companions and how you help them, and more, all matter to their development as characters and party members. And with 7 companions, there's plenty to customize, from bespoke gear to abilities and more. Though each companion has access to 5 abilities, you can only take 3 into combat, so it's important to strategize different combos and synergies within your party. Rhodes says beyond this kind of customizable characterization, each companion has issues, problems, and personal quests to complete. This is kind of, I suppose, what we were expecting. That the companions have their own storylines and their own likes and dislikes. And usually your reputation with them goes up if you make certain choices, and even if you make those certain choices, if they're not in the party with you, then maybe it doesn't affect them at all, and they might not gain approval for you. And I'll talk a little bit about level design, and then I'll go a little bit into lore spoilers. I'll have a timestamp, and I'll have YouTube chapters to make sure that if you don't want to get any sort of lore spoilers, you can skip that. Don't call it an open world. They say Veilguard is not an open world, even if some of its explorable areas might feel like one. Mike Gamble describes Veilguard's status as a hub-and-spoke design where the needs of the story are served by the level design. A version of Inquisition's Crossroads, a network of teleporting Illuvians, returns, and it's how players will traverse across northern Thedas. So you get lore-accurate fast travel, as it were. Instead of a connected open world, players will travel from Illuvian to Illuvian to different stretches of this part of the continent. This allows them to go from places like Minrathous to tropical beaches, to Arlathan Forest, to grim and gothic areas and elsewhere. Some of these areas are larger and full of secrets and treasures. Others are smaller and more focused on linear storytelling. Arlathan Forest is an example of this, but there are still optional paths and offshoots to explore for loot, healing potions, and other things. Regardless, BioWare says Veilguard has the largest number of diverse biomes in series history. Another bit about level design. As they mention that Arlathan's Forest, for example, that it has beautiful greenery, but as well as hallmarks of the blight, tentacles and pustules. A very high fantasy. And they say even though Arlathan Forest whimsy is whimsical, it will contrast starkly to other areas. There will be more grim locations and even grimmer story moments, because without that contrast, everything falls flat. And here I'll talk a little bit about lore and spoil a little bit of lore. And I think that's all for the article after I do that. So if you don't want to see the spoilers, thank you very much for watching. And yeah, I'll see you soon with more facts either about Veilguard or more gameplay, because I'm playing through the other Dragon Age games. And I appreciate you joining me exploring this article and seeing what we could learn that we didn't know already. And then a little bit about the lore. From what we've seen in the gameplay trailer, we've seen that Rook and his friends come across Solus doing his ritual, trying to tear down the veil, and we disrupt it, but something goes wrong, and we see these two figures emerge, which I theorized and have now been confirmed. These are two elven gods that are unleashed from their prison that Solus once built for them in ancient times. Now, when this goes wrong, this ritual, Rook will wake up in the Fade and hear Solus talking to them and say, a few drops of Rook's blood interacted with the ritual, connecting them to the Fade forever. And Solus says he was attempting to move Elgar'nan and Gillenane, part of the Evanuris or Elven gods of ancient times, to a new prison, because the one he had previously constructed was failing. But because of our doing, Solus is trapped in the Fade and these gods are now free. It's up to Rook to stop them, and thus the stage for our adventure is set. And then a tidbit about the Lighthouse is that it is set in the Fade. It's a towering structure centered amongst various floating islands, which is very interesting. It makes me wonder if it is one of the islands that we can see in some of the games, even in Origins already, when we look in the Fade into the sky. And then the other tiny bit that they mention about the elven gods is they say they called them blighted elven gods roaming the world. So they might be infected with the Darkspawn taint, and I wonder how that makes them look and act, just like Corypheus maybe was corrupted. They say, however, with blighted elven gods roaming the world, and thanks to the blight's radiation-like spread, it's a much bigger threat in Veilguard than in any Dragon Age before it. So magic, evil elven gods, Darkspawn will be coming back in a big way, and I'm very excited about it. And that's all there is, because I didn't want to go through the play-by-play of the first and a half levels that this article goes over, and I think we'll be fine experiencing that for ourselves when we get to play the game.